Hey everybody, so this video we're going to talk about equations of lines. Just like the other stuff in chapter 1, there'll be some stuff that's review that we'll go over pretty quickly, and then we'll focus on the new stuff, which is really interpretation and using stuff in word problems. Okay, so let's do some review first. Okay, so we're going to review the different forms of the equations for lines. So right now we're going to review slope-intercept form. Okay, so this is the form that people are normally most familiar with, the slope-intercept form. Okay, so y equals mx plus b is that form where m is the slope like we talked about in the previous section, and b is the y coordinate of the y-intercept. Okay, so let's do some review examples of using this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is put this equation into slope-intercept form. Okay, so we're going to do that just algebraically. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 5x from both sides. Okay, and then I'm going to isolate the y by dividing by -4. Okay, so there we go. I'm in my y equals mx plus b format. Okay, so for part B, okay, we're going to state the slope and the y-intercept. Now from the slope-intercept form, you should just be able to read off the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so here we would have that our slope is 5/4. Okay, and our y-intercept is going to be, okay, before we even say what it is, I want to remind you that an intercept is always an ordered pair. So we're going to give our answer with an ordered pair. Okay, and for y-intercept, the x-coordinate is always 0. Okay, so you can see there's nothing out here. That's why I picked this example. It's a little bit unusual. So normally this would say like +1 and then 1 would go here. If it doesn't say anything, right, we know that that number is 0. So our y-intercept is actually going to be 0, 0. Okay, and then our last part is going to be graph using the slope-intercept method. Okay, so we're going to grab some graph paper here. Okay, so the slope-intercept method just means you're going to use the slope and the intercept to make your graph. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is graph my y-intercept, the point 0, 0. Okay, and then I'm going to use my slope to get the next point. So I have my slope as being 5/4. Okay, so remember that's the vertical change. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over the horizontal change 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then I'm going to connect these points with a line. Okay, and that's the slope-intercept method for graphing. Let's do one more example like that. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take the same parts as the previous example, so we're going to write in slope-intercept form. Okay, so let's do that now. So first, we're trying to isolate y, right? That's the main feature of this form. So we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. Okay, and then we're going to divide both sides by 3. Okay. Then for part B, we're going to state the slope and y-intercept. Okay. So here we go. Our slope is going to be right here. So our slope is -2/3. And our y-intercept, again, is going to be an ordered pair where the x-coordinate is 0, and this number is the y-coordinate. Okay. And then for the last part, we're going to use the slope-intercept method to graph. Okay. Okay, so we're going to graph our y-intercept, which was the point 0, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we're going to use our slope to find the next point. Okay, so our slope was -2/3. Okay, so the negative means down, so we go down 1, 2, and then the 3 goes to the right. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we're going to connect those with a line here. Okay. All right. Let's see a different kind of example using slope-intercept method. Okay, so now we're going to get some information about a line, and we're going to write the equation as opposed to the other way around. Okay. Okay, so for this line, we have that the slope is 2 and the y-intercept is 0, -3. Okay, because the information that we have is the slope and the intercept, we're going to use slope-intercept form. Okay, and then we're just going to fill in the information that we know. Okay, so the slope is 2. Okay, the y part of the y-intercept is -3. Okay, all right. So let's do one more. Okay, part C is actually a graph. So we're going to look at the graph here. Let me grab my graph. Okay. So we're going to write the equation of the line that's shown here. Okay, so again, we're going to use the y = mx + b form. Okay, in this condition, we actually have some choices about what form to use, but for this example, we're going to use this form. Okay, now if we want to find the slope, we're going to count between 2 points. Remember from the section on slope that it doesn't matter which points you pick or which direction you go, right? So I'm going to pick this point and this one, okay, just because I think they're easy points. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that means the top of my slope, I guess I'll just write slope here, right? The numerator is going to be positive 3 because I'm going up 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. And then my x change is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so my change horizontally is positive 4. Remember, for x, to the right is positive, to the left is negative. Okay, and then here I can see my y-intercept. Okay, it's the point 0, negative 3. Okay, so that allows me to write my equation, 3/4 x, okay, minus 3. All right, so that's what I would consider review about that. Okay, so let's do a more advanced example. Okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the graph and find the slope and y-intercept. Now this is really similar to the previous example, so let's look at our graph. Okay, so here's my graph. Okay, so I'm going to find the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, the y-intercept is easy to see, right? It's the point on the graph that crosses the y-axis, so that's going to be right here. Okay, so because each of these lines is 2,000, we're going to have 10,000, 12,000, 14,000. Okay, so my y-intercept is going to be the point 0, 14,000. Okay, now let's count our slope. Okay, so I'm just going to choose the marked points. Again, you can pick whatever points you want. Okay, so if I'm moving from this point to this one, okay, I'm going down. Let me see where I am here. Okay, so I'm going down 2, 4, 6, 8,000. Okay, so I'm going down 8,000. Okay, and then I'm going to see how much I'm moving across. Okay, so it's moving from 0 to 10. Okay, so that's going to move 10. Okay, and then I'm just going to reduce this, okay, by dividing by 10. Right, negative 800 over 1, which is just negative 800. Okay. All right. So that information was gathered from the graph. Okay. So let's do part B. Okay, so we're going to write an equation for a as a function of w. Okay, so this is telling us that a is our output variable, that's our y-type variable, and w is going to be our input variable or our x variable. Okay, remember this means we're using function notation. Okay, so I'm going to use function notation here with my output variable a of w and my input w. Okay, now this is a line and I know the slope and y-intercept. Okay, so I'm going to use the mx plus b form, the y equals mx plus b form, okay, but I'm going to use the given variables. So instead of mx, I'm going to use mw, because remember we're asked to use w, okay, and then I'm just going to fill in the information from part A. Okay, so our slope was negative 800, okay, and then our y-intercept was 14,000. Okay, so we're still using the mx plus b form, but now we're just using this this function notation. Okay. All right. So okay, let's answer part C. What does the slope mean? Okay, so remember the slope is negative 800 over 1. Okay, so I'm just going to write that down right here. Okay, so remember the y part is the money in her account. Okay, and the negative means it's going down. Okay, so the money in her account is going down by $800. Okay, and then the denominator is the time or the number of weeks. Okay, so the money in her account is going down $800 for every 1 week. Okay, so we might write that as she loses or she spends $800 per week. Okay. All right. So let's answer part D. Okay, what does the y-intercept mean? Okay, so remember the y-intercept is 0, 14,000. Okay, so we're going to interpret the 0 part. So remember the input variable is w for weeks. So it's been 0 weeks. So we might say to start, right? If no time has passed, that's the start of something, okay? And then this is the money in her account, in his account, sorry. So we would say, I don't know why I said she here either. It's Steve, okay. Although to each their own. So he loses $800 per week, and then to start, he has $14,000. Okay, so again, we're trying to use plain language. So that's why when we say to start, instead of when it has been 0 weeks or after 0 weeks, right? Because that's not really you interpreting it. Remember, you're trying to use as normal of language as possible. So if nothing has happened yet, that's the start. Okay. All right. So those are the examples that I wanted to do for the slope-intercept form. Let's talk about our next form of linear equations. Okay, so again, m is slope, okay, and x1 comma y1 is any point on the line. Okay, all right, so let's do some examples of using this. What example number am I on? 5. Okay, so we're going to write the equation of the line. Okay, so for the first one, we're going to have slope is -2, and the line passes through the 0.13. Okay, all right. So because we have one point and the slope, we're going to use point slope form. Okay, so y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, and then we're just going to fill in the information that we have. Okay, so this is y1. Okay, our slope is -2, and our x1 is 1. Okay, now you can simplify this if you want to put it into slope-intercept form, but it doesn't specifically ask that. Okay, so make sure you're checking the directions for what form the answer should be. If it doesn't say, then any form is okay. All right, so here it just says write the equation. So this is the equation. We don't have to change the form if we don't want to. Okay, if you did want to, certainly you would multiply this out. Okay, so we could just stop here. Okay, or we could multiply this out and then add 3 to both sides. All right. Okay, so let's see one more question like this. Okay, we're actually going to look at a graph. Okay. Okay, now what's funny about this graph is that we can't actually see the y-axis. We can tell on the x-axis that this is 5, so the y-axis is over here somewhere, okay? But we don't actually see where it is, okay? So we're going to use, again, we have points and we can count the slope, so we're going to use the point slope form. We're not going to use the intercept form because we can't see the intercept here. Okay, so we're going to use the point slope form again. Okay, and first we're going to count the slope. Okay, so I'm just going to use these marked points. Okay, so my y is going down by 1. Okay. So my vertical change is down 1, and then my x change is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the positive direction. Okay, so my slope is -1/5. Okay, then in terms of choosing your point, okay, you can choose either marked point, this one or this one. Now, it would be not a good choice to choose this one, for example, because we would have to estimate its value. So as long as you choose a point that you know the exact value of, any point will work just as well. Okay, so we're going to use the point 5, 2, for example. Okay, so let's fill in our information. Y minus 2 equals the slope, which is -1/5, times x minus 5. Okay, and again, it doesn't specify a form for the answer, so I'm going to leave my answer like this. Okay, all right, let's do one more example of writing the equation. Okay, so in this example, all we have is 2 points. Okay, now no matter what form we use, we have to find the slope. Whether we use slope intercept or point slope, we really need to find the slope. Okay, so we're going to look for the slope. Okay, remember the slope is change in y over change in x. Right now we've just been counting that off of the picture. We actually don't have to do that, right? We can find the change by finding the difference, right? So if you remember from your Algebra 1 class, okay, you can just subtract the y values to find the difference or the change, and then subtract the x values to find the difference or the change, okay? So this would be -1 minus -3, okay? And then subtracting the x values, 4 minus 2. Okay, now it's important to be careful here. When you're subtracting -3, you're really adding 3. Okay, so -1 plus 3 is 2, and 4 minus 2 is 2. Okay, so I'm going to get that my slope is 1. Okay, then I'm going to use, I have points, I have the slope, I'm going to use my point slope form. Okay, we don't have the y-intercept, so we can't use the slope-intercept form. Okay, so then I'm just going to fill in all my information. Again, it doesn't matter which one of these 2 points you use, so maybe I'll just use the first one. Okay, so I've just filled in my y value, my x value, and my slope. Okay, now I do want to say this seems pretty weird, so let's simplify this to y plus 3. Okay, and you certainly don't really need this 1 out here, so we can simplify that to x minus 2. Okay, when you're doing these types of problems, it is important to simplify this, okay, so that you have something where you don't have the double negative, but other than that, you're not required to change it to any particular form unless the directions specifically ask for a certain form. Okay, all right, let's do one more example. Okay, this is a type of example that doesn't get shown a lot. Okay. Okay, so oftentimes students feel compelled to write the equation for this, put it into slope-intercept form, and then graph the line. Okay, there's really no need to do all of that. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so we're going to start by graphing the point that we were given, which was the point 1, 2. Okay, and then we're going to use our slope, which is -2/3. Okay, so that means from here to our next point, the change is -2, okay, and then +3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now that you have these 2 points, you can connect them with a line and make your graph. Okay, you don't need the slope or the y-intercept, you just need a point and the slope to make a graph. Okay, or you can graph it with the 2 intercepts like we saw in the previous section. Okay, I hope this was a good review for you guys about writing the equation of lines and using the equations of a line to graph, and I will see you guys soon.